Coming up today, we're taking some time in the fall to prep one of the beds that needs some help. And later on, we'll be harvesting some of our hard shell beans a little early. Find out why we're doing that. All that and more coming up today on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener is sponsored in part by, for all your non-GMO, organic, and heirloom vegetable, flowers, and herb seeds, visit dollarseed.com. Sioux Growing Supply, located in Wausau, Wisconsin, focusing on certified leaf compost, an excellent amendment for poor soil, retains moisture and adds nutrients, which equals less watering. Available in Labor Saver pre-filled trays and pots, bag and bulk. Visit SiouxCompost.com. Organic fertilizer for the health-conscious organic home gardener. Family owned and operated. Visit thewiveggardeners.com. Don't poison your soil with municipal water. Attach a body, mind, and soil hose filter. Free shipping exclusively through the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Just click on the body, mind, and soil icon. Authentic Haven brand soil conditioner for the home gardener. Easy to brew. Visit ManureTea.com. No measuring, no thinking. Stamp it, plant it, stop plotting, start planting. GardenStamp.com. Welcome to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener. I'm Joy Baird. Well, whether you've had a marvelous season of gardening or a minimal bad season or somewhere in between, it's time to start analyzing what portions of your garden need some help. And every place that you grow, in our instance, every raised berm, will need some compost to feed the soil back. Now, we're in our butternut squash, and well, we had a volunteer pumpkin that came up in this bed. This bed was absolutely horrible. This one here and the one next to it, the pepper bed, absolutely needs all the help we can potentially give it. So what we are intending on doing here is we're going to rip up this bed, dig all the weeds out of it, use the garden fork. We've got a couple of small butternut squash here and that we're going to harvest. They're not going to get any bigger. And we're going to bring and incorporate some certified leaf compost from Sioux's. We're going to put a couple bags in here, in addition to free coffee grounds that you can get from your local coffee shop. And we're going to work that into the soil as well. And then hopefully by spring, this will all work in and incorporate and break down, and we will have this bed back to the best state it can be for planting whatever we decide to plant in this next year. So it's just one of these projects. It's going to take some time and some work, but basically what we're going to do is just get in here and take all the weeds out first, and then go back through it and remove all the roots that we can, and then start working the soil and trying to get it prepped for next spring, because this bed needs more help than a lot of the other beds in the garden. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so we've got about almost half of the bed done here. Holly and I have been working on this for a little while, and the soil, we're starting to get the looseness that we're looking for. And again, every time you fluff the soil, you want to try to remove every root and fiber of grass and weed, because they will propagate very quickly and sprout again. Now, we're doing this in the fall for a couple of reasons here. One, we have the time, and this will prepare the bed when we incorporate the Sioux compost, coffee grounds in here. This will allow the bed to compost down and to get the worms in here. So by springtime, all we have to come in here is either fluff it with a fork or bring a broad fork in, loosen up, and we're ready to go. Obviously, there's a number of weed seeds that are potentially in the soil that we're not going to see until they sprout. Now, as we have over here in our soon-to-be garlic bed, we prepped that about 2 weeks ago, and we were seeing weeds begin to emerge from the soil. This is a perfect opportunity for us to reach down in there, remove the weeds with as much roots as possible, to continue to try to purge that bed of weeds. And that's the same procedure that we're going to follow with this up till the time it's going to get too cold and the weeds won't grow anymore. This will allow us to see what we need to try to purge out with allowing the germination of some of these weed seeds. Now over here we spoke about there's butternut squash, and we had a volunteer pumpkin that came out of here and we've harvested the pumpkin. Now with this butternut squash, it got hit severely with powdery mildew. So we're just gonna go ahead and pull this squash up, but we're not gonna put it in the compost pile because this powdery mildew doesn't break down in the compost. It's a bacteria or a fungi or mildew that will stay in the compost, and then you're going to distribute it over your garden. You're going to have problems again next year. So you either want to burn this or put this in the trash and get it off the property. But we do have a few little butternut squashes here that we can enjoy. But again, we want to get rid of the powdery mildew and get this bed prepped. Now, we want this bed to initially be like our soon-to-be garlic bed over here. So we want the bed over there to look like this bed, which we've processed or loosened up, or the same procedure a couple weeks ago. The fork goes in it real nice. You flip it over, and it's really nice, moist, easy to work with. And we'll go ahead and we'll loosen the soil one more time before we put garlic in here. But very nice, very loose, very fluffy, as they say, or loomy. Got a lot of worms starting to emerge in here. I flipped some over on this end, and I couldn't count the number of worms that was on my fork. There were so many of them. So by doing this, we're bringing the life back in the soil. There's another little one right there. Bringing the life back in the soil and and see, there's a weed there. That's a root that was left in there 2 weeks ago, and we're already beginning to have a sprout. So that's the importance of getting as many, if not, obviously you're going to not get all of them, but get as much root material out of these beds as possible. So we're going to go finish that bed up over there, and then add the compost and the coffee grounds. Okay. So Holly and I got this bed worked up here, and there's still, you can still see, a few grass pieces here. And I got a rock down here. But for the most part, it's not bad, and what our plans are is just to leave it. We're not going to try to get it all fine and break all the clods up. That'll happen over time with rain. But now that we've got all this done, and we've got as many roots out of it as we've talked about why that's so important out of a raised bed, we are going to first layer the equivalent of 2 5-gallon buckets of coffee grounds on this bed here. You can get coffee grounds from your local coffee shop. Most of them are very friendly and very acceptive of you bringing in a bucket. They give it a couple of days and they'll have it full. They do throw the coffee filters in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this out, and I'm going to take the coffee filters out of the bed and put in the compost pile. The coffee filters will break down, but they won't break down as fast as I'd like to in this bed. I just want it to be coffee grounds. Then we're going to take some certified leaf compost and top dress it, and then walk away from it, and then let it sit for it's going to be a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months before we really get cold. We'll see what weeds emerge, as we talked about, and then we'll extract those and try to purge those out of the bed so this bed can be as ready as it possibly can for next spring. So the coffee filters will go there, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to shake this around. Now, how much is too much coffee? That can happen. You just have to be cautious. I don't have the actual, so many pounds per square feet will make too much nitrogen in the soil. Coffee grounds are a very high nitrogen. They have nitrogen in it. It breaks down as the worms process it. If you can put too many coffee grounds in your compost pile or on a particular growing area, and that will encourage your tomato plants or your pepper plants to put a lot of green foliage on, but very, very little fruit. If you do happen to ran into this particular problem, you can plant leafy greens such as spinach or lettuce or any type of greens and herbs in that bed for a couple of years until that nitrogen level goes down. But an adequate, you can tell that we're just putting a few pounds of coffee grounds on this bed, so nothing of any great concern. And with this bed being very poor soil, it's not gonna hurt anything. I'm gonna get these out. I'm gonna add the other bag, and I'll start mixing, or the other bucket, and I'll start mixing these in. All right. Got one bag poured out there. This will be the other. Now I incorporated the coffee grounds. Help if I had the whole bag opened up. Incorporated the coffee grounds in the soil a couple inches just to give the worms a little more accessibility to them. Now, I'm not going to work this compost in. I'm essentially just going to do what they call top dressing, and then we'll just let it set. And as it sets and it rains, it will work itself down into the upper portions of the bed here. I'll try to get a little bit everywhere. And then as we have some of our compost ready, we can add more to the bed as well. So it's really, it is a lot of work to get your garden bed prepped, but getting it prepped now in the fall will, one, give an opportunity for the soil to rest by adding the nutrients in the compost, will allow the soil to be able to get fed and break down what necessary minerals and minerals it has and needs. And also it gives you a jump start in the spring that you don't have to go ahead and do this in the spring. It's already done in the fall, and you can quickly get your planting in, and you won't have to spend time preparing beds. When growing corn, you want to grow it in a block. We've talked about this many times on the program, and every other gardener in the world speaks about this. And that means a grid of so many wide by so many long, because these are tassels, and the little particles that are coming off, that's the pollen that pollinates the ear on the stalk, the hairs that come out of the ear. That's what this pollinates. Just like a bee would pollinate a flower from flower to flower, this drops onto the ear. Now the reason why you want to do it in a block is because the wind's blowing this way and this way and that way and that way, and this pollen will fall down and it will attach to the hairs on the roots. Now you may have kernel, or you may have stalks of corn like this guy here that has no ear. It's clearly not going to form an ear, and your tendency would be to just rip it up to throw it in the compost pile. But you want to wait on that because it has a tassel and it has pollen coming off of it, and this will help pollinate the other corn around it. So just because this doesn't have an ear doesn't mean that the pollen on the tassel can't help its neighbors or brothers and sisters pollinate the ears of corn that they have on their particular stalk. Also, if you want to help pollinate the ears of corn, you can do it by two ways. You can just take and shake this and the pollen will fall down, or you can take and capture some in your hand and you can sprinkle it over the the hairs there, and that'll help pollinate the kernels in that particular ear corn as well. And it also depends on soil nutrients as well, on how big the kernels and the corn and all that goes. It's all based on how good the soil is.
Well, today we are going to process some beets for canning. And one tip I want to leave with you is that when it comes to processing beets, you are going to have some staining or some dyeing of what you're using. So if you have a really nice wooden cutting board that you want to keep from being beet red or the pinkish color that comes off of beets, then I would suggest using one of your maybe older cutting boards, or we like these cutting boards that are flexible, and we like, because we don't really care if they get stained, as opposed to using our nice wood cutting board. So it's something to think about, something that you can do to prevent staining of your cutting board, especially whether it's beets or something else that may stain it. Think about just picking up some of these flexible cheap ones that you can use in that situation, or maybe if you cut a lot of meat, that way you don't have to worry about meat juices getting into your cutting board.
All right, so I'm here at our pole bean trellis here, and I've got about 5-6 strands here that are these Trail of Tear black hard shell beans. Now we're going to harvest them even though they're not dry. Now you can do this, you can leave them on the ground, on the vine until they dry, or you can harvest them like we are. Now what they look like once they are dry is this dark purple, almost black type of hard shell bean that you would cook up. Now the reason why we are going to harvest them is to allow this plant to put more beans on. We've got some flowers up here. There's a little bean there. So what we're essentially doing is the plant will put on as many bean pods as it thinks it needs to reproduce. So if we harvest these before this plant dies or it stops putting on fruit or beans, it'll think, hey, I've got to continually put on more and more and more. So that's what we're trying to do, is encourage the plant to put on more flowers, and then we will harvest those the same way up until it's too cold for this plant to grow. Now what we will do with these beans is just put them in a tub like this and leave them in a very warm but non-sunny location, air circulated location. And then in a couple weeks these will begin to dry out, and you want to harvest these when they've bulked up. You can tell that there's beans in there. Let me pop one of these open. There you go. You can see that the beans are in there. Now these will dry down probably 25 to 30%, but you can see that it's a real pretty purple color. And they are edible like this. They're just not as tasty as like a traditional green bean would be. But we'll let them dry out, and then we can use them for cooking. Now another thing you want to do is when you're harvesting these beans, or any beans for that matter, is get a good pair of snips or scissors, because here's the problem. This one's ready. I'll start tugging on this. It will pull the plant. If there's other flowers that are trying to be put on, it will pop those off. It's just a whole lot easier to snip the beans off. And see, this one here is already in the drying state. You can already tell that it's drying out just from that sound there. So some of these are beginning to reach that mature state of drying, so I'm trying to catch some of these are not, so that this plant can continue to put on. It seems like the ones at the bottom here are more mature than the ones at the top. And again, you can leave these on. It's just we're trying to encourage as many pods for this plant to put on as possible. Thanks for watching. Join us again next time for more organic gardening and food preserving. I'm Joy Baird, and this has been the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.